Hello and welcome to the Meadow Report. I'm your host, T.H. West. Today we'll be discussing Alchemised by Senlinyu, a dark fantasy novel that was released in September of 2025. Alchemised is adapted from Senlinyu's work Manacled, a Harry Potter fanfiction that focuses on Hermione Granger and Draco Malfoy during and after the war. This video will be an in-depth summary of Alchemised, helping you understand the universe it takes place in and the major plot points. This is not an analysis video, nor is it a comparison between Alchemised and Manacled / the world of Harry Potter. Senlinyu has done a great job with this world building, so let's get ourselves settled into the universe of Alchemised before we get into the plotline. We can't get anywhere until we talk about alchemy, as it's the base of the book. Alchemy, as we define it, is the medieval predecessor of chemistry, based on the transformation of matter. Alchemists were primarily concerned with converting base metals into gold, creating an elixir of immortality, and creating a panacea, which is a remedy to cure all disease. In the world of Alchemised, alchemy is the manipulation of resonance, the energy emitted by metals and living beings. There are 8 traditional metals for the 8 planets: lead for Saturn, tin for Jupiter, iron for Mars, copper for Venus, quicksilver for Mercury, silver for Luna, lumithium for Lumithia, and gold for Sol. Lumithia is the bigger and brighter second moon of this universe and is responsible for alchemical power. Here's a direct quote. By its nature, Lumithium bound the 4 elements of air, water, earth, and fire together, and in that binding, resonance was created. The sacred faith held that resonance was a gift, intended by Sol to elevate humanity. Lumithium can also increase or create resonance in objects through direct exposure. However, pure lumithium is too powerful for humans. Overexposure can cause wasting sickness, and for those with resonance, it can result in a raw, metallic pain within their nerves. As lumithium's ruling planet, Lumithia's moon phases have a direct effect on alchemists themselves. The ascendance, which is the full moon, causes an increase in resonance to the point of disorientation. The abeyance, which is the new moon, creates a decrease in resonance, making everyone weaker. There are different kinds of alchemy in this world as well. Everyone has a different kind of resonance, and some are more rare than others. The ability to transmute something into gold, for example, is the most rare, but those with resonance can always transmute metal of some kind. Alchemization, which is transforming one metal into another, is the most difficult form of alchemy. Many early alchemical writings were attributed to someone known as Cetus, but because his work spans centuries, it was thought that early alchemists wrote under a collective pseudonym to avoid persecution, and later alchemists used the name to legitimize their discoveries. An excerpt reads, "While the works of Cetus were considered historically seminal, they were highly inaccurate, and it was doubted that any alchemist by the name had even existed, but with no one else to credit, almost all early alchemical theories and discoveries prior to Palladius' founding remained attributed to him." Other types of resonance include pyromancy, vivimancy, necromancy, and animancy, all of which are very rare. Pyromancy is the ability to create and manipulate fire. Vivimancy is the ability to manipulate living beings. Vivimancers often work as healers, but their work is not backed by scientific research because vivimancy is seen as a, quote, corruption of the soul. Here's a direct quote. Necromancy, in addition to its violation of the dead, was also a violation of the natural cycle and natural law, and vivimancy stemmed from the same corrupt form of resonance. Healing was permitted within limits because it was categorized as a spiritual intercession, something selfless and divinely led. Most healers tended to appear in remote places in the mountains, and were only taught to work by intuition, their success or failure left to the will of Sol, no science about it. The inverse of vivimancy is necromancy, the ability to manipulate the dead. Necromancers can reanimate the dead into necrothralls, essentially mindless zombie servants. Certain necromancers can also abandon their original body and transfer their soul into a necrothrall, creating what's called a lich. The rarest type of resonance is called animancy, the ability to manipulate souls. They can search through and manipulate others' thoughts and memories as well as their own. They can also temporarily insert their soul into another living body. Alchemised is set in the country of Palladia, particularly on an island in the far north of the country. The people are pale-skinned and fair-haired and are culturally reserved and quiet. For a real-world equivalent, think of Palladia as a Scandinavian or Nordic country. The surrounding countries include Hevgos, a very militaristic country, and Novice, a monarchical country. Palladia is ruled by a royal family called the Holdfasts, along with a class of religious elites and warriors. The primary industry here is metalwork through alchemy. To get certified to join an official alchemist guild, Palladians have to attend the Alchemy Institute, established and run by the Holdfast family. In the First Necromancy War, Orion Holdfast was blessed by the god's soul to defeat the necromancer. Afterward, he discovered the modern principles of alchemization predicated on spiritual purity. Here's a quote. "Only an alchemist with a soul as pure as the metal they sought to create could alchemize it. It was soul's own light and purity bestowed in blessing upon the Holdfasts that endowed them with the divine ability to turn lead into pure gold." He also founded the Order of the Eternal Flame, a religious ruling faction that serves soul and fights necromancy. Here's a quote. "The Order of the Eternal Flame, created by Orion Holdfast himself, was founded on soul's principles of the natural cycle of life and death. It was for Orion's bravery and willingness to sacrifice his life that he was blessed by the heavens and made victorious. Any use of necromancy is a violation of the cycle." In the era of the main story, the Holdfasts operate on a principate system, which in our world is defined as representing the political regime dominated by such political leader, whether or not he is formally head of state or head of government. This causes tension among the alchemy guilds, who believe they should run the country, while the principate's powers should be limited to religious affairs. Luke Holdfast is the principate in our story, and is flanked by his paladins Lila and Soren Bayard. He is a pyromancer and student at the Alchemy Institute. His father died when he was too young to rule, so he uses his great-aunt Ilva as his steward. Helena Marino is one of our two primary main characters. She's a foreigner from Etros, an island nation to the south of Palladia. The people of Etros are dark-haired, olive-skinned, and very culturally expressive. For a real-world equivalent, think of Spain, Italy, or Greece. Because of this cultural divide, Helena is usually treated as an outsider. Helena is a sponsored student of the Holdfasts and was moved to Palladia as a young girl to study at the Alchemy Institute. She's a vivimancer and skilled healer for the Eternal Flame. When she took her celibacy vows, she was given an amulet of the Holdfast sun crest, signifying her promise to protect Luke Holdfast at all cost. Cain Farron is our other primary main character. His family formed the very first Iron Guild when Palladia was founded, and they developed a method of industrial-scale steel manufacturing, making them extremely wealthy. Cain is around the same age as Luke and Helena, and attended the Institute with them, often competing with Helena for top marks. He is an extremely powerful vivimancer, necromancer, and animancer. Our story is set in war-torn Palladia. The Eternal Flame is battling the High Necromancer and his Legion of Undying, warriors he has made effectively immortal through Lumithium talismans, and aspirants, mortals who serve the High Necromancer but have not yet been made undying. Helena and Cain are on opposite sides of the war, with Helena serving as a healer for the Eternal Flame and Cain serving as a commander for the Undying regime. It's told in 3 parts. Part 1 is a post-war world. The Undying have won the war and Helena is held captive by Cain. Part 2 is a flashback sequence during the war, where we learn how our two characters are connected and how the Eternal Flame lost. Part 3 is back in the post-war world, with our characters finishing the battles they started. Now that we have our base, let's get into the plot. Part 1. We open on Helena being imprisoned in a kind of biostasis tank. She can't see anything, she can't move, she can't escape. All she has is her mind and intermittent electrical pulses to keep her muscles from atrophying. When she's found, her captors are shocked that she's alive, as these tanks are used to keep dead bodies viable for use as necrothralls. According to prison paperwork, she has 2 inmate numbers. One says she was marked for execution, the other says she was marked for stasis, but never was confirmed for either. She's been alive for 14 months and no one can figure out why. In an attempt to get answers, a woman named Irmgard Stroud uses vivimancy to torture Helena, and in the process discovers not only who Helena is, but that her mind has been tampered with in such a way to conceal information, even from Helena herself. In the holding center called Central, Helena meets Grace, an orderly in the hospital Helena once worked in. Grace reveals the Eternal Flame has been wiped out, including Luke and Lila, and the remaining are treated as prisoners of war. If anyone escapes, they are hunted down by the High Reeve, an anonymous high-level Undying soldier, killed and reanimated as a reminder of the consequences of escape. The High Necromancer, Meadow, sends for Helena as he wants to confirm the work done to her mind. Because this work can only be done by an animancer, he's of the opinion that the Eternal Flame has hidden some important information about the war inside her mind. He uses animancy to try and break through the barriers, but is unsuccessful. A woman named Warden Mandel is brought in and is forced to confess that she was the one who left Helena conscious in the stasis tank and destroyed the records of her arrival. She believes Helena to be a traitor to her fellow Vivimancers by siding with the Eternal Flame, who believe that Vivimancy is a crime against the gods. Meadow punishes Mandel by taking a piece of lumithium out of her chest and placing it inside a reanimated corpse, making her a lich. A man named Shiseo is brought in to give Helena a set of manacles that will fully suppress her resonance. Stroud suggests that they could dissect her brain to try and recover the memories, and Shiseo reveals that the Eternal Flame has discovered a method of altering the mind from within through many small treatments called soul transference. Stroud and Meadow decide that the High Reeve should be the one to attempt to recover the memories, as he's the only known animancer besides Meadow himself. In the process of getting ready to be transferred to the High Reeve, Helena comes across a lich occupying the body of Jan Crowther, one of her superiors in the Eternal Flame. The lich recognizes her but cannot remember why. Stroud leads the lich away, saying that she needs his insight for a project she's working on, saying, "You're the only one who produced exactly what we're hoping to replicate here." Helena is transferred to an estate called Spirefell, and here we meet the High Reeve himself, Cain Farron, and his wife Aurelia. He uses animancy in front of Stroud, and she says she'll send someone along to appraise Helena's condition. He leaves Helena alone with Aurelia. Aurelia is not happy to have Helena in the house. Having a prisoner is not only messing up her social schedule, it's taking away her husband's already limited time and attention. She shows Helena her ability to transmute raw iron, which is both a rare skill and a threat to use the house, which is made of iron, against her. She seems bent on making Helena's life as unpleasant as possible, dyeing her clothes red after she sees Helena panic at the sight of red roses, and making her eat the leftover slop they give to the necrothralls. A few days into her imprisonment, Cain makes his first attempt at soul transference. It leaves Helena in pain and screaming, and in the aftermath she tries to throw herself off a balcony, but Cain stops her. She passes out and awakes to a representative from Central telling Cain that her long-term health is not something to be concerned about, as she is only meant to survive long enough to reverse the transmutations. Cain argues that if Helena dies before the hidden information is revealed, then the High Necromancer would dole out consequences. Stroud agrees with this and recommends that Helena get her physical health up so that her body can better withstand the soul transference and subsequent brain fevers. During one of their prescribed walks outside, Cain shows her a newspaper article reporting that she has been captured and taken for interrogation at his estate. The article is meant to trap any surviving members of the Eternal Flame, as it is believed they will attempt to rescue Helena from Spirefell. She also learns from the newspaper that 1. Cain murdered Principe Apollo Holdfast, Luke's father. 2. Cain's own father, Atreus, was executed for treason. 3. There are grain shortages in Palladia despite historical alliances with the neighboring countries. And 4. Healer Stroud is organizing a program that uses selective breeding to produce a new generation of alchemists, since so many of them died in the war. One day, while Helena is exploring the house, she happens upon a conversation between Cain and the Lich from Central, who is revealed to be Cain's father Atreus in Jan Crowther's body. Atreus is chastising his son for not volunteering for the selective breeding program since his abilities are so rare, and Cain threatens to throw him out of the house. At the next transference attempt, Helena has a seizure and spends an indeterminate amount of time unconscious. Stroud is mildly concerned but says they should go ahead with a monthly transference schedule. During a New Year's party at Spirefell, a man named Eric Lancaster enters Helena's room and is surprised she does not remember him. Cain is angry at Lancaster's intrusion and leads him back to the party. Helena follows them and watches from a high balcony. On the way, she sees Aurelia engaged in an affair with a man who isn't Cain, and then realizes Cain will be able to see this memory in her head and quickly moves on. When the New Year's countdown begins, Cain leans down to kiss Aurelia and spots Helena in the balcony, but does not move to reveal her hiding spot. Later on in the party, a family of prisoners are brought out for the purpose of torture entertainment. Cain puts a stop to this under the guise of the new clean execution law and kills them all quickly. On the way out of her hiding spot, Helena again catches Aurelia in a heated conversation with her own father, who is berating her for not giving Cain an heir. She says Cain has no interest in her, and if she gets pregnant, he will know that he's not the father. On another day of exploring the house, Helena comes across a room with an iron cage built into the floor and an alchemical array carved into the wood. Kane finds her in the room and they have an argument, in which he reveals exactly why she was treated as an outcast in her school days. Here's the quote. "You think the guilds invented the divide between us and the eternal flame? The Holdfast claimed all their preferences were divinely moral and treated any concessions as a violation of their consciousness. Where exactly did that leave the wants and needs of the rest of us? When anything we wanted became a sin or a form of vice simply because it inconvenienced them for us to have it. All we did was become what they'd already convinced themselves we were, ignoble and corrupt. You think it was an accident that we hated sponsored students like you? If we hadn't, how would they have kept you so lonely and desperately grateful to them?" In the weeks after, Helena finds out Aurelia's secret lover is Eric Lancaster. She thinks this is too much of a coincidence and wonders if Eric might be a spy for the Resistance. Kane quickly dispels this hope the next time he looks into her mind. On the day of another dinner party, Helena steals an unattended knife with the intent of killing herself. She runs into Atreus and Kane, and when Kane catches her in the lie, she attacks him with the knife. She hurts herself in the process and attempts to slit her own throat, but Kane stops her with his resonance. An assassination attempt on the governor kills Mandel instead. This shocks the country, as the Undying are thought to be immortal, and everyone knows the Resistance to be completely wiped out. Lancaster stops visiting Spirefell, and Aurelia spends all her time in the house. Kane is out on assignments constantly. Helena is again called in by the High Necromancer to personally examine her mind. He concludes that she is an animancer because she has the power to resist the soul transference. Kane reveals to Moreau that Helena was found near the Westport bombing before she was imprisoned, from which Moreau concludes that she was a key piece of the Resistance. He punishes Kane for overlooking this possibility. When they return to Spirefell, Helena tells Kane her theory that the Undying are being killed by Mandel's assassin, which is weakening Moreau, who draws power from them. She postulates that the purpose of the selective breeding program is to produce an animancer child, and soul transference is being tested to allow Moreau to transfer his soul into said child's body. She has a seizure, and Kane confirms her theory is correct when she wakes up. At another party hosted at Spirefell, Helena learns that the selective breeding program is underway at Central. More Undying are being murdered, this time in the same manner they tortured and killed Resistance members at the end of the war. The Undying are growing paranoid, building safe rooms out of inert iron and lead, and setting traps in their homes. Helena heads back to her room, but on the way is knocked down by Lancaster. He assaults and drugs her, but while attempting to get her out of Spirefell is intercepted by Kane, who eviscerates him. Kane takes Helena to her room and heals her. He advises her to stay in her room until his return from the city in a few days. During this period, Aurelia breaks into Helena's room. She tells Helena that she was promised to Kane before she was born, but he has never shown any interest in her as a wife. Her affair partner, Eric Lancaster, provided her with emotional support, but now she's realized it was only in an attempt to get close to Helena. Aurelia attempts to cut out Helena's eye, but the iron house wraps itself around Aurelia and she is unconscious. Kane finds Helena and she guides him through fixing her wounded eye. Once he has her stable, he revives Aurelia and threatens to kill her if she ever comes near Helena again. The next time Stroud visits, she tells Helena that she'll be enrolled in the selective breeding program. Because Helena and Kane are both animancers, Stroud and Moreau have chosen to not have Helena relocated to Central, instead opting to pair them together, as they would be the most likely to produce an animancer child. Stroud says Helena has 2 months to get pregnant or she will be transferred to Central. Privately, she reveals that she does not think Kane will be able to produce a child after all the experimentation he's been subject to, and that Helena will most likely end up in Central anyway. Kane rapes Helena 3 times during her ovulation period at Stroud's instruction. On the night of the Ascendance of Lumithia, Helena finds Kane drunk in his room. He tells her that if he would have known the pain she'd cause him, he would have never taken her, and then kisses her. The kiss shocks both of them, and Helena runs to her room. She views her reception to the kiss as a betrayal of her vows and herself, and attempts to harm herself by smashing her head against the glass and iron bars of her bedroom window. Kane stops her and chastises her for being willing to do anything for the people who let her love them. 2 weeks later, Helena is pronounced pregnant. Stroud postulates that she's been spending most of her energy into maintaining the walls around her hidden memories, but now that she has a potential animancer to grow, she won't have the strength to sustain both. She's not expected to survive the pregnancy and birth, but Stroud and Moreau hope they can extract the memories before she dies. Kane and the Necrothrall maid take to hovering around Helena as her health deteriorates. One night she has what she thinks to be a dream that Kane is glowing silver, and when he puts her hand to his chest and asks her to stay, the silver light transfers to her. She wakes the next morning confused and in pain as her hidden memories start to return. Part 2. We open to Helena arriving at Solis Splendor, the house of the Bayard family. After Helena greets the partygoers, she finds Titus Bayard winding a ball of yarn. After extensive brain damage, he now has the mental capabilities of a child, but Helena believes the real General Bayard is trapped somewhere in his regenerated brain tissue. Helena assures Rhea, his wife, that she will continue to research a cure. She tries to leave the party, but Luke catches her and voices his concerns about the war and his ability to lead. Helena assures him that everyone is fighting because they believe in him and the cause. During a council meeting where Helena is presenting casualty numbers, she lobbies for using consensual necromancy to bolster their inventory and protect the living combatants. The council vehemently opposes this as they believe necromancy does not allow the soul to ascend to the afterlife. Ylva Holdfast bans her from speaking at council meetings, but spares her a disavowalment due to the fact that she seems hysterical. Soren Bayard says her faith in the gods is not strong enough, and by proposing the use of necromancy, she's undermining morale. Ylva Holdfast and Jan Crowther call Helena in for a private meeting. In it, they are honest about losing the war, but because the Eternal Flame is fighting on religious principles, they can't risk the use of necromancy. Instead, they've taken an offer from Cain Farron to spy for the Resistance in exchange for a full pardon and Helena as his handler and war prize. Crowther makes it clear that Cain is likely to betray the Resistance and try to take power himself when Moreau's regime is destabilized, but the information he could provide is worth the risk. Crowther also tells Helena that she is to use every means necessary, including her vivimancy, to win Cain over and capitalize on his, quote, subconscious obsession with her. Helena is confused by her proposed involvement, as she and Cain did not know each other well in school, but agrees to help the war effort. At their first meeting in a factory outpost, Helena makes a vow to Cain that she is his as long as she lives. He swears that he will not interfere with her responsibilities to the Resistance. He goads her into kissing him, and during the kiss she uses her resonance to examine his physiology, noting that he feels immutable, and therefore her vivimancy won't affect him. Cain gives her an entangled ring as a signaling device. He tells her that he can only summon her. If she tries to call him with the ring, the deal is off. He gives her his information for the week, and they part ways. At their next meeting, Cain shows Helena his abilities as an animancer. He teaches her how to protect herself against interrogation under the pretext of not wanting his cover to be blown if she is captured. Under this training, she realizes she also has animancer abilities, which she keeps to herself. When Crowther is informed of Cain's animancy, he cuts off Helena from any pertinent information about the war. It's publicly assumed this new development is due to her hysterical breakdown in front of the council, and she is treated as more of a pariah than usual. Ylva and Falcon Matthias, the Eternal Flame Council's spiritual advisor, introduce Helena to 4 new healer trainees. This surprises Helena, as the Falcon has always been against new healers, but agrees to train her replacements because she knows her main job now is to be Cain's handler. While foraging, Helena sees a group of the Undying release a chimera, a genetically engineered hybrid animal. The chimera rips a Necrothrall apart and walks down the riverbank. Helena runs away and Cain signals her using the ring. He tries to tell her about the new chimeras, but she relays the account of her sighting. He tries to get her to stop foraging, and when she refuses, they compromise, and Cain says he will combat train her. Helena returns to headquarters and asks Ylva for a foraging partner in case her other duties call her away. Ylva tells her about Shiseo, who is in Palladia on a political asylum request. He's a metallurgist, but because he's foreign, he's not allowed to work at the forge, so Ylva thinks working with Helena would be a good use of his time. Cain takes command of a new district, and the old commander challenges him to a duel, causing him to lose his arm. Because of the extent of the damage and blood loss, his regenerative powers are working slower than usual, and Helena has to use her healing abilities to aid the process. Seeing Cain as a fragile human instead of a semi-immortal being alters her perception of him, and she leaves the interaction feeling disturbed. Back at headquarters, Lila checks in on Helena and tells her she's glad the hospital has trainees now, so Helena can take time for herself. During their first combat training session, Cain sprains Helena's wrists. Crowther calls in Ivy Purnell, a young Vivimancer, to heal them. Crowther then tells Helena to utilize a separate drop location if something like this happens again, in order to avoid questions being asked about why she's hurt and where she's been. At their next meeting, Kane is apologetic and says he won't hurt her again. He also tells her to start an exercise routine and increase her food ration so she'll be stronger for combat. Over the next few weeks, their liaisons are sporadic, but one day Kane tells Helena that the High Necromancer and company will be traveling out of the country for the next week, which would be a good time for any large-scale attacks. The Resistance uses this opportunity to retake the East Island ports, Undying prisons, and a laboratory filled with medical supplies. When Helena sees Kane again, he tells her Moreau isn't happy about the retaking of the ports and has been punishing Kane, as he is the commander in charge of the district. He says he won't be making the trip to the outpost again, and collapses while trying to leave. Helena convinces him to let her help, and she takes off his shirt to find an alchemical array carved into his back and inlaid with lumithium alloy. Here's the quote. "The injury was more than merely incisions and metal transmutation. The array was active. She could feel the hum of resonance moving through it. Altering an active array was extremely dangerous, the kind of thing that cost limbs. Attempting it might kill them both. She had to figure out a way to make Farron survive it, but it was rooted into him and drawing on the energy emanating from the talisman, diverting what should have been regenerating him and instead sending that power along the pathways of the array. There was no containment circle to limit it. It was activated constantly, the symbols not acting on an external target as they would in a lab, but on Farron. The power is being diverted, mutated, and then fed back into him on a closed loop. That would kill a normal human, but Farron didn't die so easily. Yet, he also couldn't change. Helena was beginning to understand how the Undying were immortal. He was not ageless. His body was trapped in time, his regeneration keeping him exactly as he was. It did not let him change, not with age or injury, but the array was designed to change him. The mutated power existed for the sole purpose of alteration, and that contradiction was killing him in a way far more profound than the mutilation of his back. He was in a crucible, and he was the crucible, and he would either die terribly or be wholly alchemized into something that could survive the paradox. She studied the symbols, trying to understand what they were intended to do. Calculating, cunning, devoted, determined, ruthless, unfailing, unhesitating, and unyielding. It made sense that an array on a person couldn't be a typical transmutation formula, but the idea of forging traits into a human was horrific. If it worked, it would carve Farron down into these 8 compounding qualities, potentially erasing everything else about him. In simple terms, the talisman is an immovable object, and the array is an unstoppable force, and Kane is right in the middle. If one won't kill him, the other will. Helena removes the infection and dead tissue and bandages him up. She understands now that Kane knew he'd be punished for his information, and assumes she knew as well. She begs him to let her continue to heal the incisions, and he reluctantly agrees. During their next healing session, Helena grows to understand that the array is also drawing energy from his physical body, not just the talisman. Her options are to either find a way to save him or kill him. She takes off her Sunstone amulet, which is supposed to hold the god soul's light and strength, with the intention of putting it on Kane. The Sunstone drops and breaks on the floor, revealing a puddle of liquid metal. It has a similar energy to Kane's talisman, and her intuition tells her it will heal him. She uses her resonance to push the metal into his chest, and for a brief moment his body glows from within. After this, he grows incrementally healthier. Kane's hair and eyes start to change from brown to silver, and Helena notes to herself that it is the exact same shade of metal she put into Kane's chest. Kane tells Helena that Moreau is looking for a prison guard from Hevgos. His alliance with Hevgos is souring due to the setbacks of the war, so the prison guard will have to be found in secret. She learns that the Undying are soul-bound to Moreau. Here's a quote from Kane. "He uses his bones, pieces of them, when we're made. Part of the outer bone of his right arm was used on me. He calls them phylacteries. It's what creates our physical immutability. A part of that is used to make the talismans. He takes the phylacteries out sometimes and either grows a new bone or takes a spare from some necrothrall. That's what he did when traveling, so he could leave some of us behind during his trip. He doesn't like to do it often, but if he traveled without leaving the phylacteries, the connection would sever, and we'd die." Kane also explains that the phylacteries are nearly impossible to steal, and if you can steal it, your mind starts to deteriorate, or your corpse is brought back and made into a lich. Escape from Moreau can only come if the Eternal Flame defeats him first. One night, Kane asks Helena to try and attack him to gauge her offensive skills. She declines, saying she won't attack him while he's injured, and her vivimancy will make up for any place she falls short. He gathers a group of necrothralls and instructs her to use her vivimancy to fight. They start to press in on her, which triggers a trauma response, and she uses a resonance push to explode them all. Kane goes to her, and she uses a resonance push again before she understands that he's not a necrothrall, but her resonance is pushed back, and when she finally opens her eyes, Kane is glowing silver. After she cleans up, she tells Kane at the beginning of the war, before she knew she was a vivimancer, people came into the hospital with impossibly hot fevers, screaming, "Get him out." The resistance didn't know about liches at that point, and by the time they realized what was happening, the liches were killing and creating necrothralls from patients and hospital staff. Helena's father tried to kill her after he was turned into a necrothrall, and she used a resonance push to wipe everyone out. Helena asks Kane if he can feel the effects of the array, and he says, "It's like being cold forged. I'm gradually being beaten into a new iteration of myself. It doesn't countermand who I am, but I feel certain things less than I did. It's easier to be ruthless and focused, harder to dissuade myself from impulses that align with what I want." He tells Helena he designed the array himself so the Undying couldn't choose what he became. A resistance scout named Vanya Getlich returns to headquarters injected with metal that blurs Helena's resonance. Because this is a new development in the war, an autopsy is ordered, suspending the traditional mourning and cremation process. The autopsy takes place in an operating theater so that Falcon Matthias and other members of the Eternal Flame can observe the process, making sure Helena's vivimancy doesn't corrupt the sanctity of the body. Helena reports to the council that there were a variety of metals suspended in a carrier fluid and injected into Getlich's muscles. Because she believed the substance to be out of her resonance repertoire, she turned samples over to the metallurgist. Falcon Matthias postulates that Helena, being a vivimancer and therefore closer in ability to, quote, those responsible, might have a better idea of the point of the experiment. Luke, Crowther, and Ilva quickly shut this down. Privately, Helena asks Crowther if they'll allow the Falcon to remove her from the Eternal Flame, and Crowther says the effort involved in doing so would outweigh her usefulness. He takes her to an underground dungeon and says to prove her worth to the cause, she can heal the prisoners they've captured so their bodies can handle more interrogation. The night of Lumithia's abeyance comes, which is an ideal time to heal Kane's incisions, as the Lumithium alloy will have the least effect on his body and his regeneration will be at its slowest. On her way to the outpost, Luke stops Helena and tells her he found out about her censure from the council for proposing the use of necromancy. He says this isn't her war, and Sol expects more if he's to bless them in the battle of good and evil. She denies his request to spend time together, saying she has to work, and rushes to the outpost. Helena slowly heals Kane's incisions. Because he has to stay conscious to check the regrown tissue's effect on his movement, he drinks throughout the procedure to dull the pain. After it's done, he asks her to drink with him, and they pass a bottle between them on the sofa. Intoxicated, he tells her she's lovely, like a rose in a graveyard. They kiss and start to go further, but Helena gets caught on the notion that he only wants her because she's in front of him. She cries, and they fall asleep on the sofa. Back at headquarters the next day, Crowther calls Helena to the dungeon. There's a single aspirant prisoner, Eric Lancaster, being tortured by Crowther and Ivy Purnell. Each time Helena heals him, he says someday he'll keep her on a leash just like Luke does. During a break between healing and torture, Ivy asks Helena if vivimancy can alter memories. She says her sister is in a fugue state over something that happened to both of them. When Helena asks if Ivy wants her sister to remember, Ivy says if she ever remembered completely, she would go crazy. At their next few scheduled meeting times, Kane sends a necrothrall with an intelligence report in his place. With her newfound free time, Helena works with Shiseo on a project that involves making chimiatric tonics that work with vivimancy instead of against it. Elaine Boyle, one of Helena's replacements, is becoming the preferred hospital healer, primarily because of her likability. After a particularly grueling week at the hospital, Helena makes the journey to the outpost but is intercepted by the Undying's necrothralls, who have retaken the area. She attempts to kill them with her resonance, but because of her long week, she's completely burned out. She engages in a knife fight and is stabbed through the calf with a metal spike. Kane finds her passed out and assumes that it's some sort of trap orchestrated by Crowther. When she tells him her resonance is gone, he realizes the extent of her efforts at the hospital and takes her to the tenement unit where they've been meeting. He heals her leg, and when she gets up to leave, he uses his resonance to unlock the door from across the room. The next time they meet, they discuss the toll. The concept that healing a mortal wound through vivimancy or reanimating the dead through necromancy requires using a person's own life force. Kane tells her it's impossible to take vitality by force in a living person. They have to give it willingly. He calls a necrothrall into the room and teaches her how to take its energy and sever the reanimation. He says it's possible it may keep the toll at bay. He also reveals it's only a skill animancers have, blowing her cover. With the war at a tenuous standstill, Helena and Kane continue combat training. He requests she get a better knife, which is denied by Ilva and Crowther, both as a concern for the suspicion it may raise and as a test to see what Kane would do when told no. He asks for Helena's resonance alloy so he can get bespoke weaponry made for her. Shiseo tests her resonancy and writes her a formula for both her strongest, a titanium nickel alloy, and one for a steel alloy. In exchange, Shiseo asks to examine a sample of the metals from Getlich's autopsy. Helena tells Ilva that it's possible Kane will kill her if he perceives her as a threat to his goals, now that the array is changing him. She requests that Elaine be officially designated as her alternate so she can push her to learn more medical and healing techniques. Elaine files a complaint with the Falcon that she's being overworked. The Falcon places a moratorium on Helena's work. To avoid further scrutiny, Ilva passes off her lab as Shiseo's, and Helena as a lab assistant, which also explains her odd comings and goings. An alarm bell sounds at headquarters, signaling an ambush. Luke is dragged back to headquarters by his unit as he kicks and screams. Lila has been attacked by a chimera and captured. In the scuffle, he hits Crowther with a wall of fire, and Helena knocks him out. In the hospital, Elaine heals Luke's minor injuries and Helena tends to Crowther. In her resonance scan, she finds the healing mistake that left his arm paralyzed for years. She fixes the mistake just as Lila is rushed in. Helena quickly realizes her injuries are too extensive for regular healing and uses her vitality along with her resonance to keep Lila alive. She passes out after Lila is healed. She wakes 3 days later. Luke is by Lila's side and tells Helena he's starting to regret the war, and heroism is not what he's been told it is. Once Lila is awake, Luke is scolded by the council for endangering his unit to save one paladin, who has sworn to protect him to the point of death. Shiseo has analyzed the alloy in Getlich's blood and found a metal from the east called Molianshi. It reverses the effects of resonance, making materials inert. The Undying have mixed lumithium, which creates resonance, and Molianshi, which reverses it, to create a kind of resonance haze. Shiseo says this metal is extremely rare, and only the Emperor is permitted to possess it. The implications that Moreau has a secret trade connection with the Eastern Empire would expand the magnitude of the war. They name the compound Nolium to conceal its true identity. Kane collapses while training, and Helena finds a stab wound filled with Nolium shrapnel. She transmutes her alchemy knife into surgical tools and finds the rest of the shrapnel. When Kane wakes up, he tells Helena that because he survived the array, the Undying are still experimenting on him to find out what he can withstand. He grows angry with Helena and tells her the Holdfasts are using her and always have been. They fight, and he throws her a blood-stained envelope before leaving. She returns to headquarters and begins to make him a healing kit as a winter solstice gift. She returns to the outpost the next week and gives him the healing kit, outfitted with medicine she's designed with his regeneration in mind. She also teaches him techniques for if he ever needs to heal himself. He gives her titanium and nickel-alloyed daggers perfectly tuned to her resonance. He forbids her from turning them into surgical tools the way she did her alchemy knife and tells her to wear them at all times. At headquarters, Ilva questions Helena on her and Shiseo's progress with the Nolium. Helena thinks that for true resonance suppression, it would have to be paired with something like copper and forced entirely into the hands. Ilva also tells Helena that Kane is climbing rank, which corroborates stories of Moreau's new weapon, previously thought to be either a chimera or the Nolium compound. She reveals the retaking of the ports was done in such a way to make it obvious that Kane had been involved, and he was expected to be executed afterward. Helena was not told about this because the council had not been confident in her ability to conceal her knowledge. She was allowed to heal Kane because it had been assumed that healing wouldn't work, and once Helena realized this organically, she could kill Kane and bring back his talisman. To Ilva's horror, Helena reveals she used her sunstone amulet and the liquid metal inside of it to heal Farron. Ilva then tells her the true story of Orion Holdfast. When Palladia was still called Rivertide, the necromancer came to the area specifically because he realized the alchemical potential of the people living there. Using his vivimancy, he performed miracles and formed a sort of cult. He gathered his followers in an underground temple and told them if they trusted him fully, he would grant them immortality. Using an unknown process, he killed them all, bound their souls together into a liquid metal-like substance, and used the power from the substance to reanimate the corpses. Here's a direct quote. When Orion fought the necromancer, the souls were still conscious, aware of the betrayal exacted upon them, that the gift of immortality came at the price of eternal enslavement. During the battle, the necromancer's control slipped, and the stone turned on him. There was a light as bright as the sun. It filled the valley, destroying the necromancer and all the necrothralls in a wave of fire. When it was over, Orion and his followers were all that remained. If the truth of the stone's nature were known, Orion feared that others might be inspired to rediscover the methods, and so, when those who witnessed the battle called the stone a gift from Sol, Orion had no choice but to let them believe it. Ylva tells Helena that Luke would have found out when he was older and ready to take power naturally, but instead, Cain murdered Apollo and power was thrust upon him. He believes he's waiting for the miracle of Sol's blessing, so Ylva is in the background, making miracles for him. Ylva believes that if Luke was told the truth of the war, that divine intervention is not coming, it could risk him falling apart, and as the face of the resistance, the risk is too great. When Helena discovered her vivimancy, Ylva thought it to be a blessing, but was concerned about the toll taking her too early to protect Luke, so she gave the Sunstone amulet that contained the Stone of the Heavens, hoping it would spare Helena. When asked why she didn't give the amulet to Luke, Ylva says the stone has never served the holdfasts. Ylva asks Helena to kill Cain because she's created a new threat to the Resistance and to Luke. If she refuses, the Eternal Flame will expose him as a double agent to the Undying and take advantage of the destabilization his death would cause. Helena asks for a compromise. Ylva concedes that if Cain will prove his loyalty within the month, they will not expose him. On the winter solstice, Ylva manipulates Helena's schedule so that she's expected at Solis Splendor for the festivities. When there, Helena examines Titus's mind again, but now with an animancer's lens, and sees where the previous errors lay. She now believes she has a better chance of healing him with her new understanding of the mind and soul. While getting some fresh air, she runs into Penny Fabian, a resistance fighter, who tells Helena the war is almost over. The Falcon gave a speech about how the stages of transmutation correlate to a period in the war, and they are almost at the final transformation where the soul becomes truly purified. Here's a direct quote. Think about it. A year ago, we were hemmed in around headquarters, no supplies, barely enough rations to keep fighting, and now we've retaken the entire East Island, the ports, all because we had faith. I guess you're not really out there at the front, are you? You must not have any idea. Things have been going so well this year. It's because we passed the test. We held firm and didn't let our fears corrupt us, and now Sol is bestowing his favor. We can't lose now. She goes on to reference Helena's necromancy proposal to the council. Don't feel bad. I'm sure you meant well. We've all hit points where we think anything would be worth it to make it all stop. Just think of how much things turned around after that. Maybe you were a final test for us. Helena realizes now that because of her censure, she has been cast in the role of doubter and tempter, someone to overcome, and no one will listen to her ever again. Now, the only loose end of their success is Cain. Helena waits for an opportunity to leave the party, but is stopped by Luke and Soren. Lila takes a picture of the three of them before leading Soren away. Luke is optimistic about the end of the war and the two of them traveling the world together. Helena tells Luke she can't be friends with him after the war, because she's a completely different person now. Here's the quote. All Luke knew was Palladia, alchemy, and the eternal flame, with their ideas about the refinement of fire, of trials and sacrifice, the purity of suffering. That it would be worthwhile eventually, in the next life, if not this one. Maybe if Helena were at the front, she could believe in all that too. But she'd spent every day of the last 6 years watching people die. She lived in the aftermath of every battle, breathed in the devastation until she was drowning in it. Nothing and no one would ever convince her that anything noble or purifying could come from this scale of suffering, that any rewards could ever be worth it. To trick people into embracing it was cruelty. But how could she tell Luke that? That none of it had ever meant anything? That the miracles he believed in were mere sleights of hand, bought and paid for with betrayal? She couldn't. Becoming increasingly disillusioned with the holdfast regime and the Institute, she goes to the outpost, having nowhere else to go. Cain shows up after her, thinking there's an emergency. Now, truly understanding the danger he puts himself in, she swears to not come back for an illegitimate reason. They continue combat training. Cain is now teaching her how to get away from the Undying and how to fight as a last resort. When Helena is finally able to pin him with her hand against his chest, Cain says she can take the talisman. She realizes that Cain expected her to betray and kill him all along, and still trained her to fight, wanting to protect her even after he was dead. The ruse of his obsession with her has become real. She kisses him, wanting him to understand that her care for him hasn't been deception, and he finally kisses her back. They have sex, and she's grateful that she doesn't orgasm, as it would be dishonorable to find pleasure in her work. Afterwards, he tells Helena that he was never going to betray the eternal flame. He wanted to avenge his mother Enid, but because the public circumstances of her death were so innocuous, he needed a false reason to give to Crowther. Helena doesn't believe him, and he reveals that after his father was arrested and confessed to treason, Moreau imprisoned and tortured Cain's mother, only letting up when Cain proved his loyalty by killing Principate Apollo. After an undying party where he was badly injured, he returned home, and Enid's shock was so great that her heart stopped. He begins to break down and cry, saying he can't handle caring for someone again. Helena knows that she's finally broken through to Cain's humanity, and she can use it to her advantage. Cain says he knew the eternal flame would reveal his duplicity once he'd outlived his usefulness, and he was climbing rank to try and maximize the fallout. Helena divulges that the eternal flame thinks he is climbing rank and playing both sides against each other, so he can rule Palladia after the war. She says she had no idea he was supposed to die until it was too late, and now she has a month to make him loyal or kill him. He asks her what will happen to her after he's dead, and she postulates that she'll probably be offered up again as a war prize to the next spy. Cain hadn't realized their deal had made her marketable to someone else, and he agrees to prove his loyalty however Ylva and Crowther see fit. Helena stops at the drop point to clean up. Crowther arrives, assuming she's killed Cain. She reveals the circumstances of Enid's death and tells him of Cain's willingness to prove his loyalty. Crowther says there was no time to train her on the true nature of her assignment, and they thought it best to let the deal run its course and handle her personal fallout afterwards. He tells her that she's the most exceptional asset the Eternal Flame has, and apologizes for everything. Cain and Crowther have a private meeting to discuss the terms of their new deal. Before Helena leaves, she hears Crowther tell Cain to beg. They continue to train, but the meetings now end with Helena giving Cain orders for the week. The Resistance takes a hit when the Undying start to use bombs, which are not a typical form of warfare in Palladia. They lose a battalion and a section of the East Island. Helena wants to recommend a break for Luke and Lila, but the Resistance cannot afford to have their figureheads out of the battle. Another attack occurs on the East Island. Luke's battalion had passed a condemned building when a bomb went off, collapsing the building. Soren, Lila, and 2 others survived. Luke is missing. There has been no word from the Undying about his capture, but the Resistance is prepared for the possibility he may return a Necrothrall or a Lich. Ylva instructs Helena to tell Cain to gather any information he can, or, if the opportunity presents itself, to rescue Luke himself. Cain has no idea about Luke's capture or the development of Nolium. He says Moreau is suspicious of a spy, so information is now more carefully guarded or purposefully misdirected. She tells him the mission is critical. He turns to go, and suddenly afraid she'll never see him again, Helena tries to clarify her feelings for him. He gives her an absolutely heartbreaking speech, which I will read for you now. I must say, it's delightful seeing all the guilt in your eyes. You know, I used to think the circumstances of my servitude to the High Necromancer as cruel as an enslavement as anyone could conceive, but I must admit it pales beside you. At least before I could console myself that it wasn't my fault, acceptance was the best I could do to keep my mother safe. It's different when I have no one to blame but myself. After all, I did choose you. I envied your naivety, how you credited me with goodness and failed to realize it was set up from the very beginning. When you begged for a chance to heal me, I gave in. When you touched me, I didn't push you away. I thought, where's the harm? It all ends soon enough, and life has been cold for such a long time. By the time I realized I'd miscalculated, you already forced your way in. You were so obvious, but that only made it worse, knowing you'd let me do anything to you in the hope it would save everyone else, even the people who'd sold you in the first place. At least when I sold my soul, my mother prostrated herself, begging to take my place. I suppose, in some regards, I'm luckier than you. After you nearly bled to death here, I thought, at least I can keep her alive. She deserves to have someone who cares to try and keep her alive. I thought eventually you'd give up, but you will do anything to save the people you feel responsible for. Of course you'd weaponize your guilt in order to use mine. I'm sure there's something poetic in it all, but right now, all I feel is a new set of manacles, so forgive me if I dislike looking at you. I'm still adjusting to the ways the new ones chafe. When Helena returns to the hospital, she works on Soren. knowing that he will go back out into the field to save Luke far before his body is ready. He tells her that he needs a healer for a project, and she follows him out of headquarters to an abandoned building. Assembled there are Alistair and Penny, the other two surviving members of Luke's unit, Sebastian, who is Apollo's former primary paladin, and Sophia Purnell, Ivy's sister and Crowther's informant. Sophia knows where Luke might be held, and Helena suspects Crowther is pulling the strings behind the mission. Soren says they need to save Luke, no matter the price, and asks Helena to reanimate him if he dies before they get Luke out. Helena makes the excuse that she needs her medical kit before they go. She runs to her lab and finds Shuseo. She writes a note for Kane detailing all of her knowledge of the rescue mission and asks Shuseo to deliver it to the outpost for her. The unit makes their way through the sewer system to the secret prison. They kill the guards and begin methodically searching the prison. They find Wagner, the guard from Hevgos the Undying has been looking for, and Soren agrees to take him along under the condition that if he does anything to put the mission at risk, Soren will kill him. On another floor, they find a lich guarding a room. They discover he's Atreus Farron. The paladins attack and cut the lich's head off, but they don't have time to retrieve the talisman, so they leave him on the ground. In the room Atreus was guarding is Luke, strapped to a medical table, torso open. Sebastian kills those working on Luke, but two escape. Helena and Sophia quickly get Luke stable enough to move. An alarm sounds in the prison, and Helena's ring starts burning with Kane's signals. Helena injects Luke with a stimulant, waking him to move him more easily. Once Luke is aware of the extent of the fight, he steals a weapon from a necrothrall and joins the paladins. They escape into a sewer tunnel and run into an Undying member, Basilius Blackthorn. He's brought necrothralls, aspirants, and chimeras with him, trapping the resistance unit. They're forced to fight, Helena using all the combat skills Kane taught her. Sophia runs straight into the floodwaters to escape the necrothralls and drowns. Blackthorn mortally wounds Soren with an axe. As he lay dying, he reminds Helena of the promises she made. She's reluctant, but realizes without Soren, they have no chance of winning. She reanimates him and tells him to protect Luke. Throughout the battle, she feels tied to Soren's necrothrall, even to the point where he is ripped apart. Blackthorn pins Helena, breaks both of her hands and wrists, and stabs her in the ribs. She is on the verge of passing out when Kane intervenes. In full helmet and uniform, so he is unrecognizable before his fighting style, he fights Blackthorn until he's close enough to rip out his talisman. Kane continues to kill the necrothralls, aspirants, and remaining chimera. He then uses his resonance to suffocate the resistance unit until they pass out. Upon Helena's request, he reanimates a few necrothralls and has them carry the resistance unit to safety. She guides him through how to heal her to the point where she can use her resonance again. He forbids her from going on another mission, and she says it's not his choice, and reminds him she's expendable. He divulges that the terms of his new deal with the Eternal Flame are contingent on her survival. They kiss and depart. Helena wakes Sebastian first, and he says he knows she reanimated Soren and possibly others, as there is no possibility she moved everyone on her own. He agrees to say he helped her move them. They wake the others and realize Luke has a very high fever, which Helena attributes to overdrugging him. Sebastian sends a signal to headquarters, and General Althorn escorts them back. Helena knows that Sebastian will have to be honest about her necromancy in his report and packs her things in anticipation of the consequences. Elaine calls for Helena, saying Luke's organ damage is beyond her repair. His fever will not go down, and he will not stop screaming. She tries to examine him with her resonance, but he knocks her down. While she's on the floor, Luke accuses her of using necromancy on Soren. He screams at her to get out, and Lila has to calm him down. Ilva tells Helena the official report is Luke hallucinated Soren's reanimation while severely injured and heavily drugged. Everyone else corroborates the story that Soren died in battle, and Helena and Sebastian drag them to safety. Helena is haunted by Soren's memories of being ripped apart as a necrothrall. She heads to the outpost to ask Kane for help, but questions her decision when she's there, not wanting him to go through unnecessary risk to reach her. She collapses on the ground and wakes to Kane and his chimera, Amaris, above her. He says she's going into shock, and they fly to a house high in the mountains. Kane explains to her why she feels this way after Soren. Necromancy doesn't bring someone back, but that can be hard to remember in the moment. When it's someone you know, when you can feel the span of their loss, it's instinctive to think it costs that much to bring them back. What you did with Bayard was put a part of yourself into reanimating him. In other circumstances, you could have reversed it, untethered yourself, but he took all of it with him when he was destroyed. You'll recover, but it'll leave a scar. They have sex slowly and gently, the opposite of their first time. She panics as she nears Orpheus, and he reminds her that she's allowed to have good things regardless of her healer vows. She sleeps in his arms the whole day. When she wakes, Cain asks how she healed him from the array. She tells him about the amulet and Stone of the Heavens, but does not divulge exactly how she used it. Cain and Amaris fly Helena back to the city. Once landed, he begs her not to go back. She says she has to go and try to do good. Crowther sends for her. Once in his office, she notices that he has pinned his right arm again, intentionally denying himself of its use because she is the one who healed it, and she's a necromancer now. He chides her for being on the mission at all, and bans her from leaving headquarters unless it is to liaise with Cain. Ivy Purnell bursts into the room and demands to know where Sophia is. Helena tells her Sophia is dead. Ivy turns on Crowther, saying he has broken his promise to protect her if Ivy did his bidding. He throws her against the wall and says he never told Sophia about the hidden tunnels, and if she knew, it was Ivy's doing. Ivy said she only told Sophia about the prison so she would avoid it if she needed to use the tunnels. Helena and Crowther go to Wagner's cell. They discover he knew Moreau in Hevgos, where he was a guard for political prisoners. Moreau had promised the Hevgos government that he was developing a method of immortality and would share it with them if they would provide him with prisoners to test it on. Moreau was frustrated with testing, as you cannot take a soul without resistance. Wagner gave the idea of binding the souls to another prisoner so they would suffer the anger, while Moreau could keep the power. Wagner saw him use bones to contain the pieces of the soul. He gives them a rough sketch of the array and describes the process. Before they can interrogate him again, Ivy kills him. Penny and Alistair tell Helena that Lila is on trial for compromising Luke's safety. Luke's feelings for Lila caused him to act irrationally, leading to his capture. Because he's Principate, he will not face council action himself, so Lila will get stripped of rank. Elaine Boyle has been named Luke's personal healer and will not let anyone see him. As Helena and Cain spend more time together, their mutual obsession and affection for each other becomes deeper. Helena tells Cain she's been banned from leaving headquarters, even to forage. He assures her it's only until the war is over, and she voices her concern about the fallout from her actions during the war. He offers to get her out of the country, but she won't go without him. Helena asks him about the phylactery process, and Cain's information corroborates Wagner's. They reach the conclusion that killing the Undying weakens Moreau since they are the source of his power. However, that means the war won't truly be over until all the Undying are dead. Helena promises she will find a way to reverse the array and unbind Cain's soul from Moreau's. At the hospital, Luke has requested that Helena be kept away from both himself and Lila. Helena now has more time for research since her other duties have been stripped. At the council's request, she and Shiseo are working on perfecting alchemy suppression. Shiseo creates a nullium cuff, and Helena improves on the design by suggesting the cuffs be inserted into the arm, which would fully suppress someone's resonance. The Undying have started to use nullium bombs in combat. This is bad for morale, until Luke comes out of recovery with renewed zeal, fully embracing his leadership. Lila has still not been cleared by the tribunal, so is forced to stay behind. She tells Helena she's pregnant, and when Helena questions the timeline, Lila reveals she's a Vivimancer. She's never told anyone but Soren, because doing so would have prevented her from being granted paladin status. Helena offers to terminate the pregnancy, but Lila declines. If she steps down as paladin primary and reframes the would-be pregnancy scandal into a love story, the promise of a holdfast heir could reinvigorate the resistance and bolster the war efforts. They agree to keep the news from Luke, but opt to tell Crowther so he can sign off on Lila's quarantine. Luke's squadron captures a warehouse filled with dead bodies and stasis tanks. They capture the warden and transport her back to headquarters. Crowther convinces Helena to use Vivimancy to interrogate her. Through animancy and regular questioning, Helena finds out that the dead bodies are kept in tanks for only a few months at a time, and electric shocks keep the muscles from atrophying so they can be used for experimentation or to make necrothralls. While Helena is trying to reverse engineer Moreau's array, she discovers a way to trap the energy surge of a death into a piece of obsidian. Cain asks that she give him a sample so he can figure out if it will be of use. One day, during a particularly bad attack, Helena receives orders signed by Falcon Matthias to move to the hospital closest to the front lines. She's suspicious about the legitimacy of the orders, but goes anyway, since the medics at the field hospital are not trained in nullium healing. When she arrives, she asks General Althorn when reinforcements are coming, and he says there are none. They can't risk more combatants losing their residence, so they've opted to keep the fallout contained. They receive a warning that necrothralls are being sent in for the dead bodies. As ward lead, Helena orders that they evacuate and head up island towards headquarters. When the last truck is about to leave, a truck driven by a necrothrall crashes into it head-on. Another bomb goes off, and Helena is hit in the chest with a piece of metal. As a last-ditch attempt at defending the survivors, she stabs a necrothrall with her experimental obsidian, and it falls to the ground. Helena wakes up post-surgery in Spirefell. It was Kane's necrothralls who found her injured and brought her to him. He's angry with her, and promises that if something happens to her, he will kill the entirety of the Eternal Flame. She realizes that his obsession with her has become a liability and considers killing him. Kane is called away to the city, and on his return, he reveals that the Nolian bombing caused fallout on both sides and would not be repeated. He also says if she dies, he will not kill the Eternal Flame members, but his contract with them would be void. A month later, Helena is healed enough to go back to headquarters. Her return is met with suspicion until Crowther comes for her, saying he knew she was found by a Splinter faction and would eventually return. Helena finds out that Ilva and General Althorn have both died. The only council members left are Crowther, the Falcon, and Luke. Helena reveals her discovery with the obsidian and says she will help Crowther test it if she is permitted to approve all orders given to Kane. Obsidian weapons begin to be used among the resistance fighters. The combatants have no idea of the true nature of the obsidian, instead assuming that because Crowther, a pyromancer, provides it, it must be infused with cleansing, holy fire. Helena is moved from the casualty ward to palliative care, allowing her to produce more of the doctored obsidian. Someone kills a lich with an obsidian weapon, and the talisman is brought back for Helena to examine. She can detect no energy, meaning the soulbind is severed. Kane calls Helena up to the roof and tells her the Undying have all been recalled from combat because of the new threat. Crowther continues to use Helena for interrogation. She refuses to torture them with vivimancy, instead utilizing her animancy skills. She discovers that if she pushes far enough, she can briefly occupy the entirety of their mind space. The subjects are sick with fevers afterwards, and she concludes that lots of short sessions are more effective and safer than long ones. Helena pitches this method as a way to heal Titus Bayard. Rhea is receptive until Luke objects, citing what she did to Soren. Rhea declines treatment. Helena finds Luke on the roof, smoking an opium pipe. He doubles down that to win the war they need Soul's blessing, and she is jeopardizing their chances by breaking the faith. The Undying have created a public alliance with Hevgos, which the Resistance interprets as a sign their new obsidian method is a real threat to the Undying. The Council proposes a diplomatic trip to Novice to try and win support from the monarchy, but Luke refuses to go. He instead organizes an assault, utilizing everyone who wants to fight, regardless of age or skill. It's regarded as the final battle. Helena tells Crowther she wants to build an obsidian bomb. She asks Kane to set the bomb where it will have the most impact. He tells her of a welcome dinner for the Hevgosian officials and promises he will leave before the bomb goes off. Lila is restless before the final battle, and when Helena suggests they tell Luke about the pregnancy, Lila reveals he already knows. She says he doubled down on the secrecy, saying he needed her, and if people knew, they'd send her away. Helena tries to talk to Luke, but Elaine bars her from seeing him. The day of the final battle, while Matron Pace, the hospital lead, is speaking to Helena about the side effects of nolium exposure, she reveals that Luke still has brain fevers. She says they're so bad he'll claw at his skin, screaming, "Get him out," until Elaine sedates him. When Helena questions why she was not informed, Pace says that Luke was specific that he did not want her involved. Helena realizes that they were too late to save Luke, that somehow Moreau had gotten to him before the Resistance could intervene. She wants to tell Crowther, but he's missing. She runs to the front lines and hears word that the Undying have taken headquarters. To do that, the Undying would have, quote, needed extensive information about their security protocols to infiltrate, a spy with a high-level security clearance to get in, and intimate knowledge to create necrothralls with the right instructions. Helena finally gets to Luke under the guise that she has news about Lila. Her, Luke, and Sebastian go to a private room. I really love how Senlinyu has written this reveal, so I will read it to you verbatim. "What's wrong with Lila?" Luke asked the instant the door was shut and the three of them were alone. "Nothing," Helena said. "She's fine." Anger lit Luke's face. "I just didn't realize you knew about the baby," Helena said, meeting his eyes. Sebastian started. "What baby?" Luke tensed enough that his armor clicked, but his expression was controlled. He didn't even look at Sebastian. "What baby?" Sebastian asked again. "That's why you came here?" Luke asked, his blue eyes glinting cold. "Because of that?" Helena's heart was beating so fast, it was a thrum in her chest. "No, I came because I don't understand why you won't let me heal Titus, but you've been letting me take care of your heir." "Luke, what did you do?" Sebastian said. Luke ignored his paladin. All his focus was on Helena. "Lila can protect herself. You've already done enough to Titus." Helena's throat closed, but in that moment she knew this was not Luke. She should have realized sooner, but she'd spent so much time fearing his rejection, dreading the inevitable schism, that she had not questioned its happening. She looked away. I was in one of the field hospitals during the massacre, when the Liches infiltrated using living bodies. Apparently, a living body won't accept another soul. It's like an infection. The body tries to burn it out. That's why they came in sick with brain fevers, screaming and clawing at themselves, saying, "Get him out," until they died. She drew a slow breath as she finished healing Sebastian's leg. "Do you know anyone who suffers from fevers like that, Luke?" Sebastian had gone very still. Luke shook his head. "Can't say I do." He said it calmly, but there was a growing pressure in the air. Helena found the cracks in Sebastian's rib. "You surrendered yourself to save Lila. You knew it would cost everything, but you did it anyway. You told me that you chose her as your paladin because you wanted her by your side so you'd have a chance of protecting her, even though you knew you weren't supposed to. I know how it killed you every time she got hurt. You didn't even want me to clear her for combat again after she lost her leg." She kept looking for any glimmer of the person she knew. "Now she's the mother of your child. Instead of getting her to safety, you've kept her in isolation for months. And right this minute, you have every reason to think she's been captured, that she'd be one of the first people they'd kill, but instead of running to her, you're here with me. Luke would never do that." "Luke, what have you done?" Sebastian was staring at him in horror. Helena asked, "Who are you?" It was like watching a curtain being pulled back. One moment, the expression and characteristics were still there, and then Luke sighed and seemed to vanish beneath his own skin. "Well," he grinned at them both, a smile like a slit throat, "I thought you'd realized months ago, but you're all such fools when it comes to the holdfasts." Sebastian trembled beneath Helena's fingers as they both stared at this thing standing in front of them. Helena's hand slipped to her back. "Who are you?" she asked again. "I've gone by so many names, I don't remember them all," said the person in Luke's body. "Once, long ago, my brother called me Cetus." Cetus reveals that he and Orion Holdfast were twins in the first Alchemists. Cetus pretended to be Orion to gather followers for his immortality experiments in Rivertide. Once Orion had found out about the Stone of the Heavens, he tried to kill Cetus, and discredited his work after he was dead. Now, Cetus operates as Meadow. Meadow placed a phylactery in Luke, hoping that Luke would accept him naturally. When he didn't, and in fact tried to tear Meadow out, Elaine drugged him so heavily that now Meadow can operate Luke's body like a necrothrall. Helena deduces that Meadow's original body is dying. He took Apollo Holdfast's heart, courtesy of Cain, and switched his other organs out for Luke's. Now he's impregnated Lila to ensure another Holdfast body. Cetus kills Sebastian and comes after Helena. She paralyzes him and looks into Luke's mind, seeing that Cetus has completely torn it apart. She tries to convince him to let her talk to Luke, and Cetus says, "Why bother with him? He's weak and useless, just like Orion, so satisfied with mere tricks that he suppresses his true power, denying his animancy." With this new revelation, Helena promises to tell Cetus how to make the obsidian weapons if he lets her talk to Luke. He obliges, and Luke tells her to run. Cetus tries to stab Helena, and in the struggle, she stabs Luke with the obsidian knife. Cetus is ripped away, and because he was the only thing keeping Luke intact, Luke starts to unravel. He tells her to reanimate Sebastian, chose not to draw suspicion. He hugs her, and they leave. Outside, in an alleyway, Luke makes Helena promise to protect Lila and the baby, then dies. Cain finds Helena and tells her the war is over. Helena says her and Cain could still kill off the Undying since they can both make the obsidian, but Cain insists that Helena is leaving Palladia. She argues she won't leave without Lila, both because of her promise to Luke and because Lila is carrying the only living holdfast, which Meadow needs. She promises she'll do anything Cain asks if he gets Lila. Cain rescues Lila, but blows his cover in the process, as there are records of him accessing the lab she was being held in. He only has until the next day before he's found out. Cain knew his cover would be blown, but knew that Helena would have to agree to leave with Lila despite it. Helena agrees to leave, but requests to speak with Shiseo first to teach him how to use the obsidian. Cain leaves with a list of supplies, and Helena begins to scrounge up any metal she can find. When they return, she convinces Cain to take Lila across the river to Novice first, so that they'll have time for a goodbye when it's her turn. As soon as Cain leaves, Helena starts to build a bomb with the supplies she requested from Shiseo and the metal she ripped out of the room. She explains to Shiseo her intentions to blow up the Westport lab so that Lila will be presumed dead, the prisoners will not be subject to any more experimentation, and there will be no records of Kane's duplicity. Shiseo offers to set the bombs for her, but she refuses, saying she needs to use necromancy. She writes a note to Kane confessing her love for him and leaves. On the way to the Westport lab, she runs into Ivy Purnell and Crowther as a necrothrall. Ivy tells Helena the High Necromancer promised to give Sophia back to her if she gave them the headquarters and Crowther, dead or alive. Helena tries to convince her that Sophia is dead, but Ivy won't listen. Helena reaches the lab and commandeers necrothralls to find the ventilation openings and set the bombs. The blast throws her and threatens to knock her unconscious, but she injects herself with a stimulant and starts to run. She kills everything in her path until she runs into General Althorn as a lich and Lancaster. Althorn's lich instructs Lancaster and the necrothralls to take Helena. She stabs the lich, but in the pursuit of its talisman, discovers a pendant of the Farron family crest, and realizes Althorn's lich is really Atreus Farron. In her hesitation, she's knocked out and captured. Helena awakes in a large cage in the center of Headquarter Commons. A motor car pulls in the gates and Luke steps out, followed by Moreau. Moreau forces Luke, who Helena knows to be a necrothrall, to beg for immortality. He tells Luke he is unworthy and kills him in front of everyone. The Undying start to sort the prisoners. Helena is marked as part of a coal group until Mandel sees her and picks her out for the stasis tanks. Someone objects, saying she's marked for interrogation in connection with the bombing, but Mandel overrules him. Helena knows that if she's ever interrogated, either Kane or Moreau would be the ones to search her memories, and each came with its own danger. She decides to use animancy on herself to hide her memories of Kane and her secret work with the Eternal Flame to protect both of them from Moreau. Mandel throws away her paperwork and places her in a stasis tank, where she is kept for 14 months. Part 3. Helena awakes in a stupor, torn between her memories of Kane, her lover, the Resistance spy who would do anything for her, and Farron, the High Reeve, who hurt her irreversibly. She asks if the Obsidian murders of Mandel and the rest of the Undying are his doing, and he confirms it. He tells her that Lila and her son are alive and waiting for her. Kane tells her he looked for her after the bombing. He volunteered to find the missing and look through all the dead. He says Moreau watches the house through reanimated eyes, but now that she's pregnant, her bedroom is safe, since he won't call her in for animancy sessions. Helena realizes that Kane was performing for Moreau through her eyes, knowing that any moment between them might be seen through her memories. He tells her to rest, promising that soon she'll be with Lila. Helena realizes that the manacles she wears are her and Shiseo's design, and the soul transference method is her idea and research. Kane continues to discuss escape plans with Helena, but his narrative is unusually crafted and stylized. Helena can sense deception, but she's unsure of where. Eventually, she realizes he's lying about joining her after her escape, and with enough questioning realizes he plans to die. After her escape, he will be outed as a traitor and executed. With the loss of the High Reeve, who everyone views as the real crux of power, Moreau's regime will be destabilized. Helena makes Kane promise to let her research how to unbind him from Moreau, and he agrees under the condition that she will stop if it affects her health, and she will leave when Shiseo arrives, regardless of her progress. Kane removes the Nolan band from Helena's manacles, and her resonance returns. She begins researching. Kane tells Helena he'll make sure she has the tools to end her pregnancy once she escapes. She has no intention of aborting the baby, and they argue, which ends in them finally confessing their love for each other. Stroud visits and announces their baby is female. One day, Helena breaks into the room with the cage to study the array on the floor. She realizes it is an animancy array, and the feeling is so overwhelming she collapses in the center of it. She wakes hours later. Kane insists she stop her research, as one of the conditions was keeping her health intact, but they compromise, and she continues but does not leave her room without him. Shiseo's arrival is drawing closer, and Helena continues her research. She believes she's successfully reverse-engineered Moreau's array, but to return Kane's soul to his body, they need a willing, sacrificial soul. During a dinner party at Spirefell, Stroud insists on bringing Helena downstairs as a show of power. She stuffs Helena's dress to make her look visibly pregnant and parades her in front of the Undying, explaining that Moreau will use her baby as his new physical form. The Undying take this as an admission that the High Necromancer is weakening, and things deteriorate even further when it's revealed that Kane is the father. Atreus taunts Kane about his legacy and Moreau's long leash, which leads Kane to explain to Helena that the task of finding Mandel's killer has been reassigned to Atreus. Over the next few days, Atreus has prisoners delivered to Spirefell to interrogate and torture. With the threat of spies, he's convinced Spirefell is the only safe place left in Palladia. One day, while prisoners are being delivered, the truck driver sneaks into Helena's room. She reveals herself to be Ivy Purnell and tries to rescue Helena. Ivy reminds Kane of their first meeting, where he was instructed to kill her but instead ran away, drawing the Undying's attention and inadvertently saving her and Sophia's lives. He reveals himself to be Mandel's killer, and Ivy realizes Helena's imprisonment is all an elaborate ruse. Kane moves to kill her, but Helena instead asks Ivy to help them, saying she owes Kane for years of her and Sophia's lives. Ivy agrees to get Kane's phylactery from Moreau. The next day, Aurelia interrupts Kane and Helena's walk outside to complain about Atreus. His interrogation activities have left gore all over the house. Atreus comes outside, focusing his attention on chiding Kane until Aurelia makes the mistake of comparing herself to Enid, at which point Atreus slits her throat. In the aftermath, Kane is called away suddenly. He returns with the news that Shiseo has been killed. Shiseo's death, which was the result of a poorly concealed attack from Novice, causes tension among the Undying to ramp up. Kane is ordered to kill a slew of prisoners as a show of strength. Stroud suggests they move Helena to Central, which has been set up to be a, quote, gestational environment, but Kane vetoes this idea. They argue, and Kane sends Stroud away before being called away himself. He returns badly injured. Helena uses the Necrothralls to carry him to her bedroom. She injects Kane with a stimulant, and he's awake long enough to tell her that Hefgoss has announced an alliance with the Liberation Front, citing Kane's barbaric slaughter as the reason. Helena keeps him stable as his regeneration slowly heals him. When he wakes, he tells Helena she'll be leaving that night. He leaves to make the rest of the arrangements. While he's gone, Atreus burns Helena's door down. He says he finally remembers her for the night of the bombing, but believes she acted as a decoy. Atreus sets Helena on fire, and she admits to blowing up the Westport lab, and that Kane has been the spy all along. She also reveals Enid's torture at the hands of Moreau, and when he falters, she uses animancy to show Atreus all her memories of Kane. Kane comes in time to keep the house from burning down. He takes Helena out to the courtyard, and Atreus follows. They fight about Enid, and Kane transmutes the wrought iron filigree to trap Atreus. As he moves to heal Helena, a truck stops just short of the gates and Ivy Purnell gets out. She's holding Moreau's arm, containing Kane's phylactery. Helena begs him to let her try and reverse the soul bind now that they have the phylactery, and Kane reminds her they need a willing soul. Helena asks Atreus, reminding him that Kane is all that's left of Enid now. He agrees, saying Enid would want him to save their son. Kane and Helena build an array into the floor. Once it's activated, she unbinds Kane's soul from the phylactery and pushes it back into his body, then winds the energy from Atreus' soul around his talisman. She uses the last bit of it to reanimate Atreus' lich so that he can help her carry Kane outside. She tells him to burn down the estate. Helena, Kane, and Amaris take flight as Spirefell is consumed by flames. They arrive at Lila's house in a few days. Lila is angry that Kane is now part of the escape plan, but goes along with it for Helena's sake. The abeyance opens the sea trade routes, and Helena, Kane, Lila, and Lila's son Paul board a ship set for an island outside of Etras. On the ship, they learn that with the High Reeve declared dead, the Undying's regime has been crippled, and surrounding countries are planning to move against Palladia. They arrive at the house Kane has arranged, large and two-storied, overlooking a cliff. Finally safe after years of wartime danger, they sleep for days on end. They slowly settle into their new lives. Left with no other responsibilities, Kane's obsession with Helena reasserts itself. She makes him promise that he will choose to care about their daughter, and not to only love Helena, the way Atreus did with Kane's mother. Enid Rose Farron is born, with Helena's dark curly hair and Kane's silver eyes. Her and Paul become fast friends. They continue to receive news of the war in Palladia. Lila is unhappy with the way things are transpiring and insists on returning during the winter abeyance. Helena provides her research on bomb making, and Kane trains her on combat vivimancy. She returns and works with the Novice and Hefgoss military to kill Moreau. Lila returns to their Etrasian island to bring Paul back to Palladia. She tries to persuade Helena to return with her and join the reconstruction effort, but Helena refuses to go without Kane, whose name will never be cleared. The epilogue occurs years later, when Enid is a young woman. She arrives in Palladia to study at the rebuilt Alchemy Institute. While touring the city, Enid steps into a bookstore, where she sees a book about the war. She looks up information about her parents and expresses her dissatisfaction at its accuracy to Paul. They leave the shop, and we close on the history book's only picture of and information about Helena. Principate Lucian Holdfast with Paladin Soren Bayard and foreign-born alchemist Helena Marino. She survived the war but died during imprisonment prior to liberation. She was a non-active member of the Order of the Eternal Flame and did not fight. That concludes our summary. Let me know your thoughts and questions on the book in the comments, and consider subscribing for more episodes of the Meadow Report. In addition to running this channel, I am also a freelance book editor. If you have a manuscript that needs a second pair of eyes, email me at stheleneediting@gmail.com. That is STHELLAND editing@gmail.com. Thank you so much for watching.